Did you know that Back to the Future was almost called Spaceman from Pluto? That's right. One of the studio executives tried to force that title on the filmmakers, believing it would be more marketable. Thankfully, producer Steven Spielberg and director Robert Zemeckis managed to shut down the idea, using a bit of creative diplomacy to keep the film's now iconic name. This near miss alone shows just how easily this beloved 1985 classic could have turned out differently. Instead, we got a timeless blend of teen comedy, sci-fi adventure, and heartfelt storytelling that remains fresh and funny nearly 4 decades later. So, get ready to discover 29 remarkable behind-the-scenes stories. Back to the Future was rejected over 40 times for being too nice. The script itself faced a staggering number of rejections, over 40 by some accounts. Zemeckis and writer Bob Gale shopped it around Hollywood for years, only to hear comments that it was too nice, lacking the raunchiness of typical teen comedies of the era. Ironically, the same studio system that found the story too wholesome would soon realize that Zemeckis' comedic vision, centered on a wholesome high schooler traveling in time, was precisely what mid-80s audiences craved. Persistence paid off. Once Universal finally bit, the rest was cinematic history. Gale later quipped that if any one of those rejections had succeeded in killing the project, we'd never have gotten that perfect synergy of family comedy, sci-fi hijinks, and heartfelt nostalgia. Stoltz was replaced by Fox when Marty needed more comedy. An oft-told tale in film lore is that Eric Stoltz was the original Marty McFly, cast after a lengthy audition process. Stoltz brought a serious method-acting approach, shooting for several weeks and delivering a more intense, dramatic take on Marty. However, the creative team realized that while Stoltz was talented, the comedic spark they envisioned for Marty simply wasn't there. Producer Neil Canton described rewatching dailies and feeling the film had lost its buoyant charm. With heavy hearts, they made the rare and expensive decision to recast. This wasn't a trivial call. Sets had been built, time was ticking, and money was tight. Yet the result, bringing Michael J. Fox on board, proved the difference between a solid movie and an all-time classic. Fox filmed BTTF at night while juggling Family Ties by day. Casting Michael J. Fox was complicated. He was already starring as Alex P. Keaton in the hit sitcom Family Ties, and series producer Gary David Goldberg wouldn't let Fox out of his contract. Zemeckis and Spielberg pulled off a crazy solution. Fox would film Family Ties during the day, often 10 to 12-hour shoots, and then hustle to the Back to the Future, set to shoot all night. He frequently got 3 hours of sleep, barely powering through with the help of coffee and Diet Pepsi. Despite the brutal schedule, Fox's vibrant performance is brimming with energy. Crew members marveled that no matter how exhausted he was, as soon as the cameras rolled, he'd light up with Marty's boundless enthusiasm. The film began with Gale wondering if he'd be friends with his dad. The roots of the movie's premise lie in a simple question that Bob Gale once pondered while looking through his father's old high school yearbook. "If I could go back in time, would I have befriended my dad?" Gale told Zemeckis, and they began to craft a scenario where a modern teenage boy accidentally thrust into the 1950s meets his own parents as awkward high schoolers. They layered in comedic tension by having Marty's mom develop a crush on him, a plot device that initially scared off some studios as too odd. But for Gale and Zemeckis, the comedic awkwardness and emotional payoff of seeing parents in their youth was precisely the film's beating heart. 5. Thompson and Glover played both teen and older versions of Marty's parents. Leah Thompson, Lorraine Baines, and Crispin Glover, George McFly, had the unique challenge of playing their characters in 2 vastly different ages, as 1950s teenagers and as middle-aged parents in 1985. The actors were only a few years older than Michael J. Fox, who played their son, yet in old-age makeup they had to appear decades older. Thompson recalled occasionally feeling silly standing next to Fox and calling him "my boy," but good-naturedly accepted the comedic premise. Crispin Glover, meanwhile, became enthralled by George's transformation from timid nerd to confident father, asking endless questions about George's motivations, stance, and hair, the better to sell the role's time-hopping complexity. Lloyd blended Einstein, Stokowski, and stage mania to create Doc Brown. Christopher Lloyd's portrayal of Doc Brown emerged from a unique amalgamation of inspirations. He took a dash of Albert Einstein's disheveled brilliance, threw in the flair of conductor Leopold Stokowski's dramatic gestures, and sprinkled in some over-the-top comedic mania reminiscent of John Lithgow, whom Lloyd had seen on stage. Lloyd shaped Doc Brown as a big-hearted eccentric, swinging from exasperated yells to childlike wonder in seconds. Indeed, from the way he exclaims, "Great Scott!" to that wild mop of white hair, every gesture is purposeful yet spontaneously hilarious, making Doc Brown one of cinema's most lovable mad scientists. 7. The Time Machine was nearly a fridge before switching to the iconic DeLorean. The DeLorean time machine wasn't always a DeLorean. Early drafts called for a time travel device housed in something more mundane, a refrigerator, in fact, rumored to be nuclear-powered. The idea, though, worried Spielberg, who feared kids might lock themselves in fridges at home, imitating the film. Once they decided on a car, the DeLorean rose to the top of the list for its sleek gull-wing doors and futuristic aesthetic. Plus, the stainless steel body looked fantastic under the lights. The comedic bonus: in 1955, the car's bizarre design convinces the locals it might be a UFO, fueling the film's Spaceman gag. That bit wouldn't have worked with a dull station wagon, so the DeLorean choice felt destined. Alternate titles included Outta Time, but Back to the Future won out. The concept of Spaceman from Pluto wasn't the only alternate title considered. An earlier notion was Professor Brown Visits the Future, which Zemeckis felt sounded like a children's picture book. Another suggestion was simply Outta Time, referencing the iconic DeLorean license plate, though the team eventually used that phrase as a design flourish instead. The tension over titles underlined how uncertain executives were about a comedic time travel flick that also had a budding Oedipal subplot. Thankfully, Back to the Future stuck, capturing the paradoxical blend of forward motion by going backwards in time. 9. Marty runs over a tree, changing Twin Pines Mall to Lone Pine Mall. If you watch carefully, you'll notice the Twin Pines Mall at the film's start becomes the Lone Pine Mall by the end. Why? Because Marty accidentally runs over one of Old Man Peabody's prized pine trees in 1955. The sly change is easy to overlook, but stands as a prime example of the film's playful attention to detail. Zemeckis adored these mini-continuity jokes, rewarding fans who rewatch the film. This subtle shift also exemplifies how a small action in the past can ripple into the present in comedic ways. 10. Huey Lewis hilariously rejects his own song in a cameo. Huey Lewis's cameo as the high school band judge who declares Marty's audition too darn loud is a wink at his real-life role composing The Power of Love. The track soared to the top of the charts, becoming the band's first #1 single. Lewis also contributed Back in Time for the end credits, capping off the perfect synergy between the film and 1980s pop music culture. The cameo was shot in a single afternoon, with Lewis gamely wearing thick glasses and an awkward tie. Fans loved the meta-humor. Here's the musician behind the film's theme telling Marty, ironically, that his music's not good enough. 11. Jennifer was recast twice, making sequel continuity a fan obsession. Jennifer Parker, Marty's supportive girlfriend, went through multiple iterations before we see Claudia Wells in the final cut. An actress named Melora Hardin was initially cast, but when Stoltz was replaced with Fox, Hardin was deemed too tall to pair with the shorter Fox. She was let go, and Wells stepped in, forming an adorable on-screen dynamic. Yet for the sequels, Wells couldn't continue due to personal reasons, leading to Elizabeth Shue's recasting. The abrupt changes made the sequel's opening scene, reshooting the end of the first film, noticeably different, a detail fans still dissect. A daring 50-foot stunt sold the clock tower's electrifying climax. The clock tower finale demanded a nerve-wracking stunt. Bob Yerkes, a veteran performer, was harnessed 50 feet above the set, mimicking the storm-lashed top of the Hill Valley Courthouse. Filming at night with wind machines blasting added to the complexity. Michael J. Fox did close-up shots on a safer portion of the set, leaving the truly hazardous moves to Yerkes. The tension was real. Any small malfunction, and the stunt could go off the rails. Mirroring that sense of danger heightened the on-screen suspense, culminating in that electrifying moment when Doc and Marty finally harnessed the lightning bolt's power to send the DeLorean forward in time. Glover's intense method acting made George McFly weirdly lovable. Crispin Glover's intensity shaped George McFly's entire arc. Glover asked Zemeckis countless questions about George's motivations. Why is he so timid? How does it feel to stand up for himself for the first time? Glover believed every mannerism, his shaky posture, the high-pitched laugh, should reflect George's repressed anxieties. On set, this dedication occasionally caused friction or delays, but it also birthed a performance that radiates lovable weirdness. George's triumphant transformation, from getting bullied to knocking Biff out cold, feels cathartic because Glover wholeheartedly invested in each step of that journey. 14. The dance scenes were sweaty, exhausting, and totally iconic. The Enchantment Under the Sea dance scenes were famously grueling. Cast and extras danced under blazing studio lights for several nights in a row. The air was thick with sweaty costumes, and the confetti used to create a festive atmosphere kept sticking to everyone. Filming the band's close-ups was equally tedious. They had to mime along to pre-recorded tracks while Zemeckis coaxed the perfect energetic vibe. Michael J. Fox, slinging the guitar for Johnny B. Goode, gave it his all, though Tim May, a session guitarist, played most of the complicated riffs. The swirling color, big band swing, and romantic tension culminated in one of the film's signature sequences, Marty ensuring his parents share that crucial kiss, preserving his own existence. 15. The DeLorean's fiery tracks were real, timed pyrotechnics. The flaming tire tracks left by the DeLorean were real pyrotechnics. The effects team laid down flame-resistant materials on either side of the wheels, then used flammable fluid that could ignite at the exact moment the DeLorean sped off. This created the uncanny illusion of the car bursting into time travel with a fiery flourish. The effect was so striking that it became a repeated motif. Each time the DeLorean leaps through temporal boundaries, it leaves those blazing lines. For 1985 audiences, it was an unforgettable image that exemplified the film's mixture of practical stunts and fantasy elements. 16. Fox learned guitar basics to make Marty's solo look authentic. Michael J. Fox dedicated himself to learning some guitar basics for the Johnny B. Goode solo. While the high-speed fingerwork was left to a pro, Fox's fretboard handling had to look convincing, especially in close-ups. He practiced extensively, bridging his comedic instincts with an energetic stage presence that sells Marty's show-stopping performance. Interestingly, behind the scenes, the band on stage was lip-syncing too, so the entire cast basically performed a pantomime that, when coupled with the right playback track, resulted in an electrifying rock and roll show. Fox found this scene one of the most joyous to shoot, despite the exhaustion from his double work schedule. 17. Hill Valley's set cleverly morphed between 1955 and 1985 on the Universal lot. Hill Valley's set existed on the Universal Studios backlot, redressed for 1955 with retro signs, classic cars, and subtle architectural touches. Then, for 1985, production swiftly swapped out signage, repainted facades, and changed vehicles. The transformation had to be meticulous enough that viewers would instantly recognize the same town, but in different eras. This part of the lot became a highlight of studio tours for years, although it tragically sustained heavy damage in a 2008 fire. Still, Back to the Future, fans can watch behind-the-scenes footage and sense the painstaking effort that went into making one plaza echo two time periods, bridging the gap between nostalgic 1950s optimism and the 1980s teen landscape. 18. Biff was named after a tough exec, with Wilson adding comic flair. Biff Tannen's name was more than just a random choice. He was partially named after Ned Tannen, a Universal executive known for his gruff manner in pitch meetings. Bob Gale never forgot a particularly unpleasant encounter with Tannen, so when creating Marty's bully, he immortalized the frustration by naming the character Biff Tannen. Actor Thomas F. Wilson injected comedic nuance, preventing Biff from becoming an irredeemable monster. Yes, Biff's a jerk, but Wilson's comedic timing and random malapropisms, butthead, keep the role entertaining. By the trilogy's end, Biff evolves in small ways, though he never loses that bullheaded flair that makes him so memorable. 19. Fueled by Diet Pepsi, Fox powered through sleepless night shoots. On those endless night shoots, Fox famously consumed prodigious amounts of Diet Pepsi to stay alert. Co-stars joked about his shaky caffeine buzz, noting that his comedic energy only seemed to intensify as the hours wore on. The lighting crew likewise had to battle fatigue because the film's schedule was built around Fox's family ties commitments. Still, they all pressed on, aware that each shot crackled with potential. Fox has repeatedly said it was punishing, but there was a creative electricity in the air. The cast became a tight-knit group, bonding in that shared delirium that sometimes arises on an all-night set. 20. Silvestri's bold score gave the film its epic, adventurous spirit. Alan Silvestri's grand, triumphant score remains one of the film's greatest assets. Having previously collaborated with Robert Zemeckis on Romancing the Stone, Silvestri was recommended by producer Steven Spielberg, who envisioned a bold orchestral theme reminiscent of classic adventure films. Silvestri delivered epic brass fanfares, elevating comedic moments into exhilarating episodes of cinematic wonder. The theme underscores Marty's dash to the clock tower, Doc's comedic mania, and the soaring final moments. The composer has joked that the music was so triumphant that it could easily fit a swashbuckling epic, but it turned out to be exactly what this time travel comedy needed, grandeur and whimsy in equal measure. Doc's surprise return was added late and launched the sequels. The original script ended simply with Marty returning home, finding that his family's life was subtly improved. Doc Brown's dramatic re-entrance wasn't there, but test audiences adored Christopher Lloyd so much that Zemeckis and Gale added the final sequence. Doc arrives in the DeLorean, states that Marty must come to the future to fix his kids' problems, and off they zoom. This playful, open-ended coda teased that more adventures could follow, though the creative team hadn't firmly planned a sequel yet. The scene ended up leaving fans clamoring for further travels, sparking a wave of speculation that eventually led to Part 2 and Part 3, 4 and 5 years later, respectively. Crispin Glover's absence from Back to the Future Part 2 was a big controversy. Glover, dissatisfied with his offered salary and certain creative directions, refused to sign on. The producers hired actor Jeffrey Weissman, used prosthetics to mimic Glover's face, and filmed him in ways that obscured direct comparison. Glover later sued, claiming that using his likeness without permission violated his rights. The lawsuit concluded with a settlement that influenced how Hollywood approaches an actor's image. The incident remains a cautionary tale. A dispute about credit and compensation can have lasting repercussions, both legally and creatively. 23. Thompson played Lorraine's crush for laughs, not creepiness. Lea Thompson's comedic challenge in portraying Lorraine's odd infatuation with her future son stands as one of the film's most awkwardly humorous elements. She approached it as pure comedic innocence. Lorraine doesn't know Marty is her future child, after all. Thompson gave Lorraine a wide-eyed curiosity and a playful flirtation that never drifted into creepiness. She said that shooting those scenes was both hysterical and nerve-wracking. But viewers recognized the jokes as silly, not sinister. The subplot underscores the story's deeper theme. Time travel can produce bizarre twists of fate, pushing Marty into situations that question how destiny and identity intertwine. 24. Despite title worries, bold marketing and music drove the film's success. Producer Neil Canton once noted that Universal's marketing department worried about the word future in the title, suspecting it might confuse mainstream audiences. They toyed with different slogans emphasizing comedic elements or the presence of a time-traveling car. Ultimately, the marketing team found a sweet spot by showcasing iconic images, Marty checking his watch, the blazing DeLorean behind him, while Huey Lewis's The Power of Love played in trailers. The synergy clicked. The film soared to #1. Won at the box office, proving that sometimes a confident stance on your film's concept pays off more than a short-sighted marketing tweak. 25. The Libyan terrorists were a last-minute fix for budget constraints. For all the comedic flair, the Libyan terrorists who chased Doc Brown stand out as a sharp left turn. Originally, the script included a nuclear test site as the power source Marty needed to return home. Budget constraints forced changes, so the team hastily wrote in the Libyans as the reason Doc harnessed stolen plutonium. Filming that scene was done quickly under cover of night, relying on minimal set dressing, a VW van, and stunts that made it appear far more elaborate. The frantic pacing suits the film's comedic action style, though modern viewers sometimes find the depiction of Libyan terrorists a bit simplistic. The Save the Clock Tower flyer became an iconic fan-favorite clue. Save the Clock Tower remains an iconic comedic beat, with Marty receiving a flyer that outlines the lightning strike that's about to happen. Fans worldwide replicate that moment at conventions or fan gatherings, handing out imitation flyers. It's become a friendly inside joke among the Back to the Future faithful. The synergy of that flyer also cleverly sets up Marty's solution to returning home, using the date and time of the lightning bolt to power the DeLorean. Zemeckis adored these puzzle-piece story elements, carefully layering them so each payoff felt simultaneously surprising and obvious in hindsight. 27 BTTF topped the 1985 box office, launching Fox and Zemeckis to stardom. On its opening weekend in July 1985, Back to the Future catapulted to the top of the box office, staying there for weeks and eventually earning over $380 million worldwide. It dethroned Rambo, First Blood Part 2, and overshadowed countless other summer releases. Audiences who took a chance on an odd time travel comedy discovered an effervescent adventure that combined teen angst, heartfelt family drama, and just enough sci-fi to dazzle. The film ended up the highest-grossing movie of 1985, making Michael J. Fox an international star and proving that Robert Zemeckis was a Hollywood force to watch. 28. Lloyd and Fox's electric chemistry made every scene crackle with life. Christopher Lloyd has often said that discovering Doc Brown felt like unlocking a hidden alter ego. He was able to channel a sense of unbridled curiosity, mania, and wonder that found comedic synergy with Marty's grounded teenage vibe. On set, Lloyd reveled in Doc's unpredictability, constantly adjusting line deliveries to give them extra comedic punch. Meanwhile, Michael J. Fox described the entire shoot as a blur of adrenaline. "I was either filming the sitcom or racing around the set with Crispin acting weird, Leah being hilarious, and Lloyd shouting about flux capacitors." That high-octane chemistry became the secret sauce that made each frame crackle with life. 29. Despite some flaws, Back to the Future remains timeless and beloved. Back to the Future has weathered controversies. Some find the mother-son flirtation awkward, Crispin Glover's departure marred the sequels, and there are always nitpicks about time travel logic. Yet the film endures as a masterclass in tone, capturing a unique blend of humor, heart, and adrenaline that remains consistently watchable. The story is universal. Who hasn't wished to see their parents as teenagers or fix the regrets that shaped our present? The idea that small choices can ripple into big consequences is timeless, reflecting real-life anxieties about destiny and personal agency. Add in the comedic brilliance of an eccentric scientist, a flux capacitor-laden car, and a rocking 1980s soundtrack, and you've got a recipe for cinematic magic. Whether you first experienced that rush of the DeLorean's fiery tracks in a 1985 theater or discovered the trilogy later on VHS, DVD, or streaming, the film's sense of wonder never fades. Pop it on today, and you'll still find yourself grinning at Marty's boyish grin, jumping at Doc's frantic 1.21 gigawatts exclamations, and feeling that surge of excitement when the clock tower strikes. No matter how many times we watch, the final shot of Doc exclaiming, "Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads," invites us, once again, to believe in the extraordinary. After all, that's the essence of Back to the Future, a jubilant reminder that with enough tenacity, optimism, and maybe a little plutonium, we can chart our own course through time.